I kind of want to talk a little bit about the safety conditions and working in a Korean convenience store. I
Mhm.
haven't had the opportunity to do that, and I know many people probably listening have not worked in, maybe LA, in a convenience store, in a laundry or a gas station. What was it like in 1990 working in that kind of environment?
hmm Well, I personally have not worked at a store, but the stories that I have heard through my parents, I mean, not through my parents, through my husband, as well as senior workers who have run these businesses, whether it's store supplies or liquor stores or other contacts, they have a very consistent story in which, again, they're working very long hours, and it is a very dangerous job. Until about 3 years ago, every person that I had met who had run these stores, 100% had been held up at gunpoint. And to tell you how ridiculous in terms of the lack of police response, my husband was sharing that he had been held up at gunpoint and he pushed whatever button to call the police. They didn't come back. They didn't come until an hour later, long after the situation. And my husband basically said, like, what happened? Why are you coming now? And the most ridiculous response was they didn't want to create a hostage situation. That was their response. Uh, you know, it's just and so for, again, these store owners, they're left on their own with no help. And so again, they're desperate. If you're working and making less than minimum wage, every item that gets shoplifted, and I have to say, many of them have learned to like take cigarettes, which are very expensive, has come even more expensive, right? Um, that they're being taken, and every item, like I said, every dollar, every $10, every $20, that's like a life or death situation, right? And many times I've heard stories where they will come and literally have bags or very big jackets, to the point where they're stuffing everything, right? And to the point they can't even hardly move, but everything's captured on video. And basically, when they confront, the people would deny. And it's only like if they were to actually open up the bag, that they would show evidence. And it's really, again, an unfortunate situation. I think if I was a customer, walked in somewhere and they accused me of, shoplifting, and they grabbed my purse and opened it, like, I think I would never ever enter that store. I think I would call the police, right? So again, it's a very unfortunate situation in which really the two communities, as a store owner and as a customer, that they're being put in conflict with one another. As an organization, we've done a commemoration of series of events on the 20th, 25th, and the 30th anniversary. And at the end of each of these anniversary events, I learned something that I didn't realize before. And, during the initial LA riots, I kept on hearing Black Korean conflict, which I had never heard of, right? But, with all the media, again, reinforcing that message, it was kind of buried in my head. Although, again, every day I had lots of great relationships, right, with leaders in the Black community. Again, some of my strongest mentors, supporters have come from the Black community, for which I'm very grateful for. But I think probably like at the 20th or 25th anniversary, I came to realize, you know what? No, it's not a Black and Korean conflict. It's a Korean store owner slash Black customer conflict. But on the 30th anniversary, we did series of talks, and there was a professor, African American from Biola University, who was sharing about basically the great relationship he had with his dry cleaner, his Korean mechanic, right? And it kind of dawned on me, you know what? It's not even Korean business owner slash Black customer. It's really probably in the two contexts of usually the liquor store or Korean store owner, I mean, a convenience store owner. and also the beauty supply. In that context, is unique in that pretty much the store owner, they're really outnumbered. They're under resourced, right? So like I said, they're barely like having enough staff, right? So there, the goods are all sprawled out, right, out in the open, and usually they're in neighborhoods where again there's high poverty, high need, and those goods are things that are needed and wanted. And again, that is kind of a unique setting in which it creates opportunities for conflict and tension. And I think um, that as our communities, again, helping to define more clearly where the conflict arises is really human response to human conditions, and not a kind of a racist thing on either side, right? I think that is really important. And if you are able to see it as a human response to create conditions created by human beings, I think then there is a more hope and better chance of being able to solve that issue, because if they're created by humans, right, then we could undo those decisions by humans, right? But if you define someone in wholesale and say, oh, they're racist or they're criminals or whatever, then that's a harder hill to climb. And so I really hope that we could do better in looking at what human decisions are creating these conditions that elicit a human response.
Yes, would definitely wish for better human responses, but I know that there have been some tough human responses that have not been good. So just looking again at the stress in these spaces for the store owners, I know you mentioned your husband being even held up at gunpoint, and that every Korean store owner that you know, and you work in LA and you work with many store owners, that every single one have had that experience. I can't imagine what that would be like to have a weapon in my face like that.
Mhm.
Because it's not just that moment; it's also the trauma afterwards. Because
Yes,
you
yes,
just can't forget an event like that. You're thinking about your
yeah,
family. You're thinking about your life.
right.
Uh, was the threat ever real, though? Was it only just the brandishing of weapons, or was the threat
No,
real?
no, people have been hurt, killed. Like I said, it's the second most dangerous job of being killed while working. So this is like the second most dangerous job. This is real, right? And at the risk of being potentially misunderstood, again, what happened with Latasha Harlins is just unacceptable. She should never have died, right? She should never have been killed. And at the same time, I really want to say that in the situation of Sunja Do, again, not to absolve her of her, actions. At the same time, I think the reality that she faced is not unsimilar to the challenges that many of the store owners face. In the court documents, I read that she was experiencing shoplifting 40 times a week. I don't know for me if my margins were that razor thin, right? Even someone shoplifting once a week would just drive me nuts, right? But 40 times a week, they had been threatened of having their store burned like 20 times, right? And they were held up, I believe, at gunpoint, robbed 30 times, and her son's life was being threatened um, by gang members because he was going to be a witness against them for robbing their store. So, and again, that kind of reality is not something unique with Sunjadu, but again, the reality that so many of these store owners face. And I have to say, like the LA riots, that was over 30 plus years, 32, 33. And so you kind of wonder, well, you know what, maybe things are better. but I think it was an article in the LA Times. I think it's been now 2 years, where a Korean family had run a store for over a decade, if not longer, in Long Beach. And they were about to retire and sell their store. And the daughter was sharing about how they did not have a decent family photo because the whole family, right, had little been, tied to this business, no vacation, no holidays, etc. And finally, right, they're going to get this break. And right before the store was going to be sold and passed on, someone came in and either shot or stabbed the mom in the back of the neck, that left her paralyzed and she could not speak. And when I hear that story, I find it so heartbreaking, that again, this family, literally poured all their life, soul, whatever, family, everything, to really like try to achieve their American dream and finally be able to enjoy what looked like in retirement, right? And the violence that they faced and just the devastation, the loss of everything that they had worked for, is real and it's tangible. And the current whole anti-Asian violence, the anti-Asian hate that doesn't stop, hasn't stopped, is real even today. And all these store owners, even now, they're being held at gunpoint, and they're not getting the same kind of police response as well. So that reality did not just happen in the LA riots back then, but it's being lived out even right now.
Yes, we're definitely not hearing that story. Story of many of these Korean businesses, scores being robbed and beaten, and then held at gunpoint. And also, you shared a stat with me that kind of startled me. In 1992, between those 2 years, January 1990 to May
Mm-hmm.
1992, I saw that you had written 25 Korean shop owners had been murdered during
Yeah.
that 2 year period
Yeah.
prior to the event that triggered Saigu.
Well, so actually it was during and afterwards, right? So leading to, and again, that was one data that I was able to capture. So again, I clearly remember coming home during that whole season. And, I was an MBA student, and we would have group meetings, group projects, and I would come home around 10 o'clock at night. And that was when my parents always had the Korean news come on, right? And during that season, it literally did feel like every night there was some news on Korean news of some store owner who was killed while running a business. And, I have said this before, that if I was African American and did not hear anything except for what I heard on the news, and that constant juxtaposition between the Rodney King beating and the Sunjadu Latasha Harlan shooting, right? That, and whatever I may have experienced walking into a store and the store owner following me around, maybe, or being rude, although I do have to say, Korean male, although Jeff, you are a very friendly guy, but I would say our first generation Korean parents, they're kind of the stoic and da, 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 da. So again, I would say, whether you're black, brown, or anyone, these Korean older male figures would not be the most friendly person, right? So I do want to put that out there. But anyway, to run into those kind of situations, I would conclude, yeah, those Korean store owners, I don't know even to say they deserve it or, whatever, but my anger would be really at that flashpoint, um, because of particular the game that the media played. I just wonder how things would be so drastically different if the media also played the news accounts of the 25 store owners who were also killed while doing business. I think that the narrative perhaps would be much more clear, more widened, that, and it would not necessarily just be a racist thing or someone who is arrogant, but really, again, the reality of the danger that these store owners face. Again, it doesn't absolve anything in terms of excuse, because at the bottom line, I know how pissed I'd be when I get bad customer service. But perhaps, again, coming alongside these store owners who are struggling, and finding programs like the job training program or marketing assistance or some kind of reprieve that would help these business owners do better, earn better revenues, give them, again, that reprieve, better customer service training, whatever, that I think would ease the tension and, set people up for greater success instead of just writing them off as being racist. I know that, I have seen many leaders really, again, create a narrative that says, hey, like when young people are causing problems, right? Committing crimes, whatever. One approach is to say, let's send them to prison. But I think studies have shown that doing that alone doesn't really, again, solve, society's problems at all, right? But to actually ask the question, why are they behaving this way, right? And whether it's broken homes or poverty or, police brutality, gang violence, whatever it is, and to come alongside to find, again, creating better human conditions that will create a very different human response. I would challenge our elected officials to ask the same question about these store owners if they are behaving in such a way that our society does not desire, right? But I do have to say, I cannot imagine what store owner would want to be following some customer around the store, right? I just can't imagine, but it's an act of desperation, right? That I think because they're getting no help. And so again, going back, what are the human conditions creating this human response? And if we could change or address those human conditions, I think we'll come out with better solutions.
We have these Korean store owners, long hours, low profit margins, constant threat of safety, things getting stolen, mental health, trauma, PTSD. What do you think is the true cost of working in a Korean convenience store? So not just the salary, but what do you think is the true cost?
Well, I think broken families too. If the parents are enslaved to the store, they're not going to have great family relationships. And if the children are also enslaved to the store, um, the full potential of what they could be and also what these store owners could be, I think, are lost. And in addition to that, again, I think these store owners, if they are given the right support, they could provide better service. They could be able to provide greater revenues that will create more taxes that they could contribute to society. I could potentially see them becoming better members of the greater community when you have a little breathing space, right? And again, bad customer service is a kill, right, to the business. And I don't think any store owner wants to do poorly in their business. So I think there's a lot of losses and that tension, loss of lives, loss of, again, what it could be.
Hearing about the true cost is kind of really debunking that model minority myth, especially in 1992 in K-Town, convenience store owner. This is not a model minority story, is it?
No. And again, it's a myth. And unfortunately, in the 1960s, Time magazine, I think that's when, the whole protest, particularly from Black leaders, and other minorities, including Asians joining in. But it was really, again, when people of color were making noise and fighting against racism, protesting against racism. They wanted to kind of create a counter narrative and again pit communities of color against one another. And so they manufactured this story about, particularly it was the Japanese that they did highlight, to say, hey, look at these Japanese, they're minorities and they're doing quite well, they're smart, and what's your problem, other communities of color, right? But it only took a little slice. And again, the vast majority of Asian Americans, we're suffering. Each of us face different challenges, but at the end of the day, it's a racist system that really does not want to relinquish their power and their privilege. And I think, again, that's what we want to awaken to.